nations. And all the victories that Riverkeeper has are your victories. We're here to celebrate these victories and to celebrate your success. I want to just acknowledge and thank a few people, Elizabeth first and John Platt. Of course, I want to thank them for hosting the event tonight. Wilbur and Susie Slockish and the Slockish family for preparing this amazing meal. Our board members, who Elizabeth introduced earlier, are volunteers and help guide our strategy and oversee the work at Columbia Riverkeeper. So thanks again to our board of directors who are here tonight. I want to quickly introduce our staff too. We have a handful of staff here. We have about 14 people on our staff, some of which are here, but I'll just say their names and maybe they could wave and stand up. So Acacia Berry is here, and Lauren Goldberg, Sam Berg, Kate Murphy. And wanted to do a special shout out and thank you for our development director, Sandy Wright, who organized the event tonight. Sandy, okay, so how the what we do and the victories and the things you read about in the paper and the newsletter get the most attention. But I want to speak for a second about how we work. The how is also important. So everything that we're doing, we keep this in mind. We want to build power, right? These victories along the way are good, but we want to build power in the communities in which we work. So we build power by partnering with and learning from residents and communities up and down the Columbia River, and trying to build leadership and do trainings for people. We build power by having our legal team support local communities with strategic legal work. We also enforce the law. That's a key part of what we do. When polluters are dumping too much pollution, we will take them to court and enforce the law. When government agencies are rubber stamping permits for dangerous projects, we will enforce the law. The third part of the how. We also want to, everything we do, we keep in mind of trying to inspire action, right? People want to get into this caring about the environment, doing something about it in different ways. So it's everything from trash pickups and restoration, planting trees, to going to protests. We try to have a way for people to get involved in a lot of different ways. So we're trying to inspire action along the way. And all of those different tactics and techniques you are supporting. So let's turn for a second to some victories. We're here to celebrate some victories. It's often a lot of bad news around the country of what's happening in the world for the environment. But here in the Pacific Northwest, we've achieved major victories, and you are a big part of that. So one that gets a lot of the attention, and there's an easel over there with some the fossil fuel projects with X's on them. Over the last decade, we have defeated every single fossil fuel project proposed on the Columbia River. That includes 10 different projects that together would have been shipping or burning over 200 million metric tons of greenhouse gases annually. That is globally significant, the work that we've been doing. These include, so as you know, I don't need to tell you this, but the Pacific Northwest has a target on its back. We have been threatened by coal, oil, and fracked gas, and taking from Canada and U.S. natural resources, dirty fossil fuels, and trying to ship them to Asia. And together we've stood up and we've defeated those. One recent example is the Tesoro Savage Oil by Rail Terminal in Vancouver, Washington. And there's some of the big heroes of that fight here from Vancouver who are on the front lines and supporting that fight. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it would have been the North America's largest oil by rail terminal. And after about a 3 or 4 year campaign, we were able to convince Washington agencies and the governor of Washington to say no, that oil export was not in our future. But the story, so that was cool, right? We set records for the amount of people that came to public hearings. We had creative lawsuits, and Vancouver really stood up, and the people of Clark County really stood up to oil, and it was an amazing victory. But that's just the beginning. What happened this year didn't get as much attention, but it's probably more exciting. So residents of Vancouver said, you know what? We stopped oil, but we want to prevent this from ever happening again. And so we worked closely with the residents of Vancouver and Clark County and pressured and convinced the port, who had new progressive port commissioners, to pass a policy that said, not only aren't we going to have oil, but we're not going to have any more fossil fuel terminals, bulk fossil fuels shipped from the Port of Vancouver. That's how change happens, right? That's how change happens. This very same port that had 3 years ago, 5 years ago, approved the lease for this. They built a giant rail loop. This was going to be their future. They now said, we don't want to see any more of that. And they did not do that because they just saw the light. They did that because people came out to the streets. Thousands of people came out to hearings. We filed lawsuits against them for doing backroom deals. And we totally changed the trajectory of where the Port of Vancouver, one of the biggest ports in Washington, one of the biggest ports on the Columbia, is now free of fossil fuels. I don't have time to tick through these one by one, but I also wanted to share a quick story about one of our big fights right now is in Kalama, Washington, just north of Vancouver. That is a company called Northwest Innovation Works has proposed the world's largest fracked gas to methane.